Chapter 1. The Stranger in the Cafe. It was an autumn evening. The air was cool, and the dead leaves blanketed the sidewalks of the quiet neighborhood where Thomas lived. Like every Friday, he had settled into his favorite cafe, a small, cozy establishment with soft lighting. His routine was simple: a cappuccino, a good book, and a peaceful observation of the passers-by coming and going. But that evening, something strange happened. As he turned a page of his book, Thomas noticed an unusual man entering the cafe. He wore a long, worn black coat and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured most of his face. Despite his peculiar appearance, it was the aura of mystery that drew attention. The man scanned the room before walking directly toward Thomas. Without hesitation, he asked, "May I sit down?" Thomas, surprised by the request, hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "Sure," he said, closing his book. The man sat down without saying a word for a long moment, observing the room around them. Then finally he broke the silence. "You don't know me, but I know you." Thomas raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "What do you mean?" The man locked eyes with Thomas. "I am a time traveler, and I have come for you." Thomas couldn't help but smile slightly. He was convinced it was a bad joke, some sort of prank. "A time traveler? Really? Why me?" The stranger remained impassive. "Because tomorrow evening you will make a choice that will change everything. And that choice will have disastrous consequences. I'm here to help you make the right decision." Thomas shook his head, incredulous. "Why should I believe you?" The man fixed Thomas with a disturbing intensity. "You don't have to believe me. But remember these words. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. you will make a choice, and your life will depend on it." With that, the stranger stood and left the cafe, leaving Thomas alone, bewildered by this strange encounter. Chapter 2. The Meeting with the Impossible. The next day, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the man from the cafe. It was absurd, but something about his words had resonated with him. He tried to rationalize, telling himself it was just a coincidence. But as the hour approached, a dull anxiety settled within him. At 7:30 p.m., he decided to go for a walk to calm his mind. He wandered aimlessly through the city streets, lost in thought, until he reached an intersection he crossed regularly. There, in the middle of the crossroad, stood a man. He was dressed the same as the one from the cafe. "You came," the man said with an almost sad smile. Thomas stopped dead, shocked. How did you know I'd be here?" The man didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at Thomas with a grave expression. "This is where everything plays out, Thomas. At this intersection. At 8 p.m. you will face a crucial choice. Go left or go right. Each direction will lead to a different destiny. One path will save you, the other will destroy you." Thomas didn't know what to say. It all seemed insane. Yet he felt a growing sense of dread. He glanced at his watch, 7:58 p.m. "What if I don't choose?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Not choosing is a choice in itself," the man replied. "But inaction often leads to the darkest of consequences." Thomas's heart was pounding. Time was passing relentlessly. "What's on the left?" he asked. "It's not for me to tell you." "And on the right?" The man remained silent. At 8 p.m., a gust of wind blew the dead leaves around them. Thomas took a deep breath. Without knowing why, he took a step to the right. Chapter 3. The Aftermath. The next morning, Thomas woke up in his bed, his head heavy. He had flashes of the previous night, but everything seemed blurry. The encounter with the man from the cafe, the crossroad, it all felt distant now, almost like a dream. He got up sluggishly, walked to the bathroom, and looked at himself in the mirror. Something was wrong. His eyes were dark-circled, and his face seemed more tired than usual. But it wasn't just fatigue. He felt a change, a weight on his shoulders that he had never felt before. As he left his home to go to work, he noticed a newspaper on his doorstep. The headline read, "Fatal Accident in the City Center. Victim Unidentified." Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He read the article, which described an accident that had taken place the previous night at the very intersection where he had met the man. A car had hit a pedestrian, killing them instantly. No one knew yet who the victim was. A chill ran down Thomas's spine. He realized that he could have been at that spot at that moment. Was this the result of his choice? Was this what the man meant by save or destroy? Chapter 4. The Time Dilemma. In the following days, Thomas couldn't focus anymore. The image of the stranger haunted his mind. He returned several times to the intersection, seeking answers, but the man was never there. Every night, he had the same nightmare. He saw himself at the crossroads, hesitating between two paths, while the stranger watched from the shadows. One evening, as he tried to fall asleep, a voice echoed in his room. It was the man's voice. "You made a choice, Thomas, but there is another decision to be made." Thomas sat up, frightened. "What do you want from me?" he shouted. The man appeared in a corner of the room, his silhouette barely visible in the darkness. "You escaped death, but that was just the beginning. Time is a loop, and it does not take kindly to being manipulated. You must correct your destiny or everything will collapse." "But what does that mean? I don't understand any of this." The man stepped closer, his gaze grave. "I can't explain everything in detail, but tomorrow another decision will present itself to you. It will be even more crucial than the previous one. Be ready, for this time there will be no turning back." With those words, he vanished, leaving Thomas alone in the darkness of his room, his stomach knotted with fear. Chapter 5. The Last Chance. The next day, Thomas spent the day in a state of extreme anxiety. Every decision, no matter how trivial, seemed heavy with consequences. He scrutinized every detail, looking for a sign, some indication of what this other choice might be. In the afternoon, he received a call. It was his sister, Claire. She wanted him to join her for dinner at her house, along with the rest of the family. Thomas accepted, thinking it might help distract him. In the evening, he got into his car and headed to his sister's house. The drive was peaceful, and for a moment he managed to forget his worries. But as he drove on the highway, an unexpected traffic jam forced him to take an alternate exit. He arrived at a crossroads he didn't recognize. The road was dark, poorly lit, and suddenly he felt that familiar sensation, that weight on his shoulders, the sense of being at a decisive moment once again. The choice. Before him, two roads once again. One led to a country road, the other to the city. He glanced at the car's clock. It was 7:59 p.m. His heart tightened. Was this the moment the man had spoken of? He knew he could no longer hesitate. A choice had to be made, but this time he wasn't sure if either option would come without terrible consequences. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and decided. This time he would take the country road. Chapter 6. The Price to Pay. The next morning, Thomas woke up with a strange feeling of lightness. He had taken the country road, and nothing particular had happened. He arrived at his sister's, spent a pleasant evening with his family, and everything seemed normal. But in his mind, something felt off. As he drank his coffee, a news flash appeared on the television. A serious accident had occurred in the city, on the other road he had hesitated to take. Several cars had been involved in a fatal collision. Thomas then understood. His choice, once again, had saved him from death. But at what cost? Had he escaped his fate, or was he merely delaying the inevitable? The phone rang. It was the man. "You made the right decision, Thomas, but time is not kind. You have one final trial to face. Be ready." Thomas's story wasn't over. Time, like an invisible enemy, continued to chase him.